Good morning, evening, afternoon to everybody. Today's episode will be in English. I want to start out by giving a shout out to the people in Libreria Guadalupana in Marketplace, um, in Anaheim Marketplace, lot C16 through C18. There's a wealth of Catholic wisdom right there. It's not commercial. I'm not advertising because I'm not monetizing this, but it is a recommend. It is a good place to go, especially if you want to get books, Bibles, books that explain you how to properly read the Bible, beautiful rosaries, and things of that matter. Having said this, hoy el episodio será en inglés, será una continuación del episodio que hablé ayer en inglés. Pero antes yo quiero saludar a las personas de la librería guadalupana en el Marketplace de Anaheim. Saludos. Now, let's continue. We were looking at the catechism. I want to emphasize first the fact that the catechism is an important part of scripture because we see it here in Acts 2:42. Somebody once told me, "Oh, I only look at the Bible, not Catholic events like the Catechism." Well, as it turns out, if you really read the Bible, you find out that the Catechism isn't just a Catholic invention; it's actually an apostolic invention. Maybe in that sense, it is Catholic because the apostles were Catholic. We see here, for example, that the Catechism actually is first before the Bible. You see, Acts 2:42, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. It does not say to the Bible, it doesn't say to any other thing. But however, this apostles' teaching, if we put it in Greek, let's look at how we read it in Greek, because that is very important. Acts 2:42, isane proskateruntes ti didachi ton apostolon. Didachi ton apostolon, that's how teachings of the apostles shows up here. And this didache ton apostolon happens to be an actual document. We can still find it and read it. It's called the didache, or Didache is how you spell it. And it turns out to be the first catechism in the history of the church. And guess what? We're looking at here that the early church studied it. It's in apostolic times, almost immediately after the Pentecost. It is the first catechism. The Bible wasn't even finished being written down yet. People were not finished writing the Bible. People were still writing the Bible, yet the catechism already existed. So we see that before there was even a Bible, there was a catechism. But this catechism, historically, we understand that the methods of teaching the catechism changed over time because of different challenges. That's why today's catechism is far thicker than the original one. Not because the teachings have changed. They don't change. The Catholic Church still teaches the same thing the apostles taught way back then. But methods come up. Different heresies come up that the catechism needs to confront. Such was the case during the 3rd and 4th centuries. We had different types of heresies coming about, like Nestorianism, Arianism. I'm not going to talk right now about what these heresies were. But with the rise of heresies, you have a rise of people promoting apologetics or the defense of sound doctrine. Some of the early apologetic preachers, some of the early masters of apologetics are the fathers of the church. They wrote documents called the patristics. There's a big list of them. But today we're going to look at some of them at the moment, okay? So because today's reading refers to them, so that's why we're reading at number 8. Today we're just focusing on number 8. Periods of renewal in the church are intense moments of catechsis. This renewal does not mean changing or introducing new teachings. No, it means that problems arise. The church has to renew itself to know how to address the challenges that come with its period. As I already mentioned, second and third centuries, you have Arianism, you have Nestorianism, you have monophysitism. All these new heresies started cropping all over the place. So we needed to get new apologetics, new wise people, doctors of the church, fathers of the church, wise in their argumenting and defending the sound doctrine taught in the Catholic Church. These are intense because they are challenges, and the church has to see how they're going to continue teaching the same teachings to a world that has undergone major changes. In the great era of the fathers of the church, this great era of the fathers of the church stems from the year 50, when we still had the apostles. Among them, you have Barnabas and Clement, and it extends as far as to about the 4th, 5th century. Some fathers of the church as late as the 7th, 8th centuries. Saintly bishops devoted an important part of their ministry to catechesis. So these people dedicated such an important, large part of their lives to catechism, to actually teaching the Word of God. It mentions here four of them: Saint Cyril of Jerusalem, Saint John of Chrysostom, Saint Ambrose, and Saint Augustine. And then many other fathers wrote catechetical works that remain models to us. In other words, catechism does not start with Trent, as many people think, but it actually starts with the apostles in Acts 2:42, and it becomes more intense during the time of the apostolic and the fathers of the church. I want to dedicate some time here to looking at who these fathers of the church was. So go ahead and join me as we look at who these people were. Uh, Bear with me. Let's start right here. Saint Cyril of Jerusalem was born in the year 315 in the port city of Caesarea Maritima in Israel. So many people complain about Catholicism because we're Roman Catholics, but they don't understand that the Roman Catholics actually were all over the map, including in Israel. Roman Catholicism did not start in Rome. It actually became, interestingly enough, Roman Catholicism when Peter baptizes Cornelius in this very same city of Caesarea Maritima. You can read about that in uh, Acts chapter 10. Well, Cyril of Jerusalem was actually of Jewish ancestry. He was born in Caesarea Maritima in the year 315 in Israel. However, in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, as I explained to you, a heresy called Arianism, which denied the divinity of Jesus Christ. Yes, the same heresy that Jehovah's Witnesses preach, denying that Jesus Christ is God, is called Arianism. Well, after Cyril of Jerusalem becomes a bishop, he finds that his metropolitan, that is the bishop above him, has converted to Arianism. This guy was called Acacius of Constantinople. So now, this being the situation, this puts Cyril of Jerusalem at odds against his metropolitan, who has become a heretic. So Cyril of Jerusalem works hard to correct the dangers and the lies taught by Arianism. Cyril's wisdom in teaching made this Arian Acacius very jealous of him. So then they both had come up at odds against each other in the Council of Nicaea, where Arianism is debunked, and all the people who hold to Arian beliefs, such as Acacius, are excommunicated. This leads to what's later known as the Acacian Schism. Now, interestingly enough, and contrary to what many people want us to believe, once the Roman Empire became Christianized, they did not favor Catholicism. It is true that there's a branch of Christianity that was paganized by the emperors, but contrary to popular belief, those who were paganized by Christian emperors were not the Catholic Church. They were actually the enemies of the Catholic Church. You see, in 358, the emperor was Constantine II, Constantine the Great's son. When Constantine dies in the year 337, his empire gets split amongst his three children, Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans II, two of which decided to embrace the Arian faith, even though Arianism was already debunked and excommunicated in the year 325. As soon as Constantine II takes power, he tries to force the church to deny the decision of the Council of Nicaea and to embrace Arianism. So Constantine II supported Acacius and his claim to take back the same bishop office that was snatched away from him. By so doing, the emperor exiles Cyril of Jerusalem, who goes to live in Tarsus. In the year 360, another council gets established, taking an advantage of the death of Constantine II. And in this other council, Acacius is removed from the bishopric and Cyril of Jerusalem is placed back where he belongs as the leader of the church right there. But in the year 367, another Arian emperor comes about by the name of Valentin II, who decides to exile him once again. However, in the year 381, the Council of Constantinople gets convened, and Cyril of Jerusalem gets to come back to it, in which the Council of Nicaea of 325 gets reaffirmed. This was the life of Cyril of Jerusalem, confronting the lies of very powerful people who wanted to impose Arianism by force. Cyril of Jerusalem suffered a lot for the defense of the truth against emperors who wanted to insist that everybody embrace Arianism. They also mentioned the Catechism number 8, which we read right now, also mentions John Chrysostomus. Chrysostomus or Chrysostom is a Greek word that means golden mouth. He was a patriarch or bishop of Constantinople. There are 5 patriarchates: the Western Patriarchate, which is Rome, and 4 Eastern Patriarchates, which are um, Constantinople, um, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem in order of importance. Well, St. John Chrysostom had become the patriarch of Constantinople, and he is considered by Eastern Christianity one of the 3 pillars of it, recognized both by Catholics as well as by Byzantines. When he rose to the level of being a patriarch, there was a lot of corruption in the Eastern Church. St. John Chrysostomus decides to reform it. So, contrary to what Protestants say, you can only reform the church from within the church. Whilst you're outside the church, you're in no position to reform it because you have become worse than the disease itself. John Chrysostomus was born in Antioch. Interestingly, the same city where Christianity went to after the apostles. So, right here, by the fact that John Chrysostomus was born in Antioch, that immediately places him in direct influence with the apostles. The church of Antioch was a church that Peter had established. That's a church where Paul grew in his faith. The major preachings were coming out of Antioch, the birth city of John Chrysostomus. So here we see now 2 of the great fathers of the church, John Chrysostomus, who gets connected directly to Peter and to Paul through his birth city of Antioch, and Cyril of Jerusalem, who connects directly to St. Peter through his birth city of Caesarea Maritima. Now, John Chrysostomus studies theology under the teachings of Diodorus of Tarsus. And in the year 375, he decides to become an ascetic, a monk. However, because of his health problems, he returns back to the city, leaving behind his monastic life. Once he was ordained a priest, he became famous for being such an eloquent and good preacher. And this is why he was given the nickname of Chrysostomus or Golden Mouth. In the year 397, he is elevated to being the Metropolitan of Constantinople. As a high-ranking cleric, as a high-ranking member of the church, he rejected all signs of vanity that tended to affect court officials as well as other high-ranking church officials. This put him at odds with many powerful people. One of these powerful people was Empress Eudoxia, who was very, very vain, using very, very expensive dresses, making silver statues of herself, and St. John Chrysostomus saw this increase of vanity from Empress Eudoxia as an insult towards the people. So John Chrysostomus preached against Princess Eudoxia, very expensive lifestyle. Eudoxia gets angry at him. During that time, also the Bishop of Alexandria, the Patriarchate of Alexandria, is third in rank. He was the Bishop Theophilus of Alexandria was trying to snatch up the territory that belonged to the Patriarchate of Constantinople. So Empress Eudoxia joined forces with Theophilus of Alexandria, who, by the way, the Patriarch Theophilus of Alexandria was not Catholic. He was an Arian bishop. And as we can see, he was an Arian bishop established there by Empress Eudoxia. We see here, Empress Eudoxia had placed the Arian heretic Theophilus as bishop of Alexandria. In the meantime, the Patriarch of Constantinople started having problems with both Theophilus of Alexandria and Eudoxia, Empress Eudoxia. This resulted in what became known in Empress Eudoxia calling forth for what became known as the Synod of the Oak in the year 403, in which the Arians, led by Empress Eudoxia and this Bishop of Alexandria, summon St. John Chrysostomus. They give him a beating, and then they exile him. However, Empress Eudoxia was pregnant at the moment, and shortly after the Synod of the Oak, which is not considered official because it was never approved by Rome. Well, Empress Eudoxia was pregnant at the time, and shortly after that Synod of the Oak, and after St. John Chrysostomus gets sent into exile, she suffers a miscarriage. Fearing it as a punishment from God, she summons Chrysostomus back to the country, repentant temporarily. Because unfortunately, not long thereafter, Empress Eudoxia decides to build a statue to herself right in front of the cathedral. And right next to a poor neighborhood, by the way. Chrysostomus takes offense to this, confronts Eudoxia on this policy, because on one part she finds it offensive that she builds her statue made out of pure silver in front of a very poor community, taunting her wealth in front of those who barely had enough to eat. And she also cited offensive of putting an image to herself right in front of a religious building. Very similar to the offenses that the Roman emperors were trying to do by putting in statues of themselves in the Temple of Jerusalem. So we see the whole thing going on again. So St. John Chrysostomus confronts Eudoxia once again. Once again, Eudoxia gets angry, and she exiles him again to the area around Armenia. During this exile, he also, St. John Chrysostomus, does a detour to meet with the Pope of Rome, proving that John Chrysostomus recognized the Pope of Rome as superior to him, proving the centrality and primacy of the Pope of Rome over him. And St. John Chrysostomus then dies in the year 407 in exile. The third father of the church mentioned in this catechism, as we see, happens to be St. Ambrosius of Milan. Now, let's look at who St. Ambrosius of Milan was. He was born in the year 340. There's a legend that says that when he was born, when he was in his crib, some bees had made their home right there. And they had left a drop of honey in his mouth, announcing that he would be a great preacher one day. Interestingly enough, Ambrosius was not as directly connected at first, for he was a governor. He started in the field of politics first. He was named to be governor of the city of the region of Milan in the year 374. And he was working during this time under another Arian teacher, under another Arian emperor called Valentinianus II. In that very same year, the Arian bishop of Milan dies. But the situation between the Arians and Catholics had gotten to tremendous levels. There was threat of violence in the streets. The Arians were threatening that if another bishop, if the next bishop was not Arian, the members of the Catholic Church would be killed in the streets. It was time to put a Catholic bishop on the back where Catholics belong, which is leading the church. But the Arians refused to admit that, and they demanded that the bishop remain Arian, or there would be violence. So Ambrosius of Milan goes over there to keep the peace. But upon entering, the people who saw him coming in started calling out, we want Ambrosius for bishop. Interestingly enough, something that rarely ever happens, both sides wanted Ambrosius to be a bishop. The Catholics wanted Ambrosius to be bishop because he is Catholic. The Arians were willing to accept Ambrosius as bishop because Ambrosius knew how to negotiate and thought that they could influence him into Arian doctrine. Boy, were they wrong. Now, at first, Ambrosius refused that position and ran home to hide because he did not want to be ordained. He did not want the responsibility. But they found him, prepared him, trained him, and by 7th of December of that same year, he becomes Bishop of Milan. Once he became bishop, he renounced all the worldly things he had. He renounced his political position as a governor. He renounced the wealth because the family he had come from was very wealthy, and decided to keep just the part that was needed to financially support his sister, who had just become a nun. His younger brother comes and takes over for everything worldly that he had done. That everything worldly that used to be Ambrosius' responsibility, such as the family business, the politics. Ambrosius hands all that down to his younger brother because he refused all that so he could focus on leading the church. Now, with the skill he had in preaching and in talking, he managed to have a lot of influence and even pressure a lot of heretics like the Arianism back in line with true doctrine taught in Catholicism. He was also very fluent in Greek, especially during a time when the people of Milan no longer knew Greek because they were focused with Latin. So he was able to read the New Testament in the original Greek. Even though there was no, at that time, there was no New Testament canon yet, he read the books that are now part of the New Testament in the original Greek. He was present there in the Synod of Rome 382 when the um, canon of the New Testament is finally established. He was instrumental in helping establish a canon that would be accepted for the New Testament. He holds in the year 381 in Aquileia a council to fight against the lies of Valentinianism. And so we see here, during all of this time, Arianism is confronting Catholicism. And during this time, interestingly enough, the church selects the books that are against Arianism to be part of the New Testament. Therefore, the New Testament does not deny the divinity of Christ. Jehovah's Witnesses do not follow the Bible. The Bible, the books selected for the canon to be the Bible, were books selected because they were opposed to the very same doctrines that Jehovah's Witnesses teach now, in opposition to the divinity of Christ, in opposition to the belief in the Trinity. Let's see. In the year 385, the emperor once again, the emperor comes demanding that there be Arian churches, because by that time Ambrosius had become successful in protecting the teachings of the church, so much so that other churches, even Arian churches, had become Catholic, as it was always supposed to be. But the emperor and his wife were Arians. They demanded that two churches be transferred over to the possession of the Arians. Ambrosius refused, saying, "I'm a soldier of Christ. I will, I will not be found betraying my Lord Jesus Christ to some false doctrine, whoever these people may be." So, for the time being, the emperors subsided, planning something for later, for 2 years later. Now, um later on, let's see, 2 years later, around Easter time, the emperor demands again, and this time the Arian emperor decides to take action. Valentinianus II, who followed Arian Christianity, uh, who opposed the Trinity, decides to take one of these regions by force. He decides to take one of those churches by force. That emperor sends soldiers in, decorates the church with symbols of the Roman emperor. When Ambrosius finds out about it, he goes in, stages a protest inside the church, and the emperor nor his forces were able to remove Ambrosius and the crowd of people who were gathered in that church in protest. So they had to leave. Um, In the year 390, in the West, there there was another emperor. I think his name was Gratian, who was a right. No, actually Theodosius. It was his name. It was Theodosius. Theodosius. Now this guy was Catholic, but or at least he claimed to be Catholic, but he failed to live up to the models of true Catholicism. So Theodosius the First massacres people in the city of Thessalonica. Ambrosius hears of this and excommunicates him for murder. And it was not until several years of penance done by Theodosius that that Ambrosius finally accepts him back. And the year 393, um, another emperor from another region starts, or a soldier actually, usurps the throne and threatens to come into Milan and desecrate the churches of Milan. Ambrosius, to protect the things that are holy, um, takes refuge in Burgundy. No, not Burgundy, excuse me, in Boulogne, France, where he takes the sacred relics that were in his possession. And Ambrosius finally dies in 397. The fourth father of the church mentioned was Augustine, who was born in the year 350 in Tagaste, in what is now um, um, Algeria. His family was of Berber origin, but even though they were from Berber origin, his family refused to speak that language and they just used Latin in the house as a sign of rejecting the the paganism of the Berber people in preference of the true sound doctrine of Christianity, which was taught through Catholicism and still is. His father was pagan. His mother was a faithful Catholic. But even though he had this upbringing, Augustine in his youth was not the saint he became afterwards. He was violent. He was arrogant. You see, since young, he was very eloquent. He was able to give very convincing speeches, and he knew it. So he was very arrogant. He thought he was the wisest person in the world until he converted to another pagan religion called Manichaeism, which was Buddhism masked like Catholicism, with a strong component of Gnosticism. Completely wrong. I'm not going to go into what they preached because that's not in the time limit of this video. Uh, when he was in his 20s or so, he decides to go to leave Africa in the south, around the northern coast of Africa, but the southern part of the empire, and migrate to Rome to further his studies. His mother wanted to come with him, but since he was a rebel at this time, he refused to have his mom with him, and he tricked her into staying in Africa. He did not want her nagging him for his mischievous behavior, for his evil wickedness, and for his arrogance. Um, but then that's where he meets Ambrosius, who we just spoke about in around the 380s. Um, Augustine, being the arrogant brat that he thought he was, decided to confront Ambrosius face to face in church and have a debate. As Augustine walks into church, waits for Mass to be over to confront them with a debate, turns out that the sermons preached by Augustine concerning the scriptures, which would later on become the Bible, he becomes converted. In the year 385, he finally gets hit hard with the truth of Jesus Christ and embraces Christianity, aka Catholicism. And after being trained in the faith for 2 years, he gets baptized in the year 387. He then, 4 years later, he decides to move back to his hometown and live as a monk. However, 4 years later, the year 397, he is um, elevated to the rank of a bishop. You see, in the year 391, when he goes back and tries to live as a monk, instead he gets named to become a priest. And even though he did not want to be a priest, he accepted charge. And 4 years later, he is elevated to the rank of a bishop. As a bishop, he dedicated his life to arguing, debating, and confronting the lies that existed. Arianism, Nestorianism, Gnosticism, Manichaeism. He took part in a lot of different councils, including the Council of 382 in Rome, which establishes the canon of the New Testament, and the canon of Hippo, and the Synod of Hippo in 396, which ratifies that canon. And this closes off the official canon. Oh, by the way, when he was president of the Synod of Rome in 382, Damasus was a pope. And even though Augustine was in Africa, he recognized the role of Damasus, of Pope Damasus, as the official word because he recognized the primacy of Rome. So he accepted the official declaration of Damasus of what books were to become the canon of the New Testament. Then, in the year 430, after many years of writing treatises, documents against heresies, defending the sound doctrine of the church, he passes away in the year 430. Each of these four people wrote a lot of important documents, which instead of presenting any changes, they only confirmed the teachings of the Catholic Church as relating back to what the apostles actually taught. So, matter of fact, I think I do have around here a list that I would like to share with you guys. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. Let me find it. Here we go. I want you to see this list as how patristics connect to the actual writing of the fathers of the church. This is a calendar of the lifetime of the different fathers of the church, the different or what we call the field of patristics. Now, notice this region here that I just highlighted. That was apostolic era. These fathers of the church got to know the apostles. They got to know what the apostles taught firsthand. And if we look carefully, 165, Justin Martyr, we see then Irenaeus, 140 to 102. He was a direct student from Polycarp of Smyrna. Polycarp of Smyrna was a student of John the Apostle. And then this Polycarp of Siena, who lived from 66 to 155, was one who taught Irenaeus of Leon, another great father of the church, one who wrote a lot on the importance of the church and the primacy of Peter, and wrote a lot of documents against heretics, such as those and the promoters of heresy, such as those taught in Protestant churches nowadays. Irenaeus of Leon lived from 140 to 202. And in the meantime, we see that during that time, let's see, we have Hippolytus of Rome, who, by the way, was a Jew who converted to Catholicism. He lived from 170 to 236. And notice this. During this time, enters Cyprian of Carthage, who learned a lot from these same people we have seen so far. Cyprian of Carthage, bishop from 200 to 258. And notice then, during that time, we have Alexander of Alexandria, 250 to 326, a great preacher in the city of Alexandria, Egypt. And guess what? During that time, guess what who we see coming up? We see Damasus, Damasus the Great, who established the Bible. We see his connection to the apostles, these great teachings of the church. Who else? And during that time, we see the preachers we've spoken about, such as, let's see here, Ambrosius of Milan, 340 through 397, and John Chrysostom, who we just read, 349 through 407, St. Augustine, 350 through 430. And hence, you see that a big part in the development of the Catholic Church was a fight against heretics. And this expanded the catechism, not adding to the teaching, but adding arguments against the heresies that were introduced so that we can know more about the sound and true faith that was taught to us by the Catholic Church, dating back to the apostles, and how to continually living the sound faith despite all the attacks that the church had gone through throughout history. Now, this is Victor Telles signing off for the channel Cristero Moderno, shouting, Viva Cristo Rey! Long live Christ the King!